Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
This weekend had 3 standard Grand Prix, and the thing that was insane about it, to me, was that we're way deep into this format with Ixalan. Pro Tours already happened. Worlds and Nationals have already happened. And somehow there's a bunch of new archetypes, all appear on different continents, and they all made top 8.
Yeah, I mean, out of the, if you just look at the top 16 from each of the 3 Grand Prix, the one in Shanghai, the one in Warsaw, and the one in Atlanta, there's really kind of 2 different ways to look at this format. The first one being, over half the field is playing energy, and a quarter of the field is playing red aggro, leaving a quarter of the field for other. But my goodness, has that other taken an exotic turn?
Well, but the thing is, some of them are actually just variations on energy or variations on red aggro, but they're like way different than the other deck, which is that's flabbergasting how different the deck can be, despite having like such a similar evolutionary ancestor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like one of the most stark examples of this is the in the finals of Grand Prix Atlanta, Hall of Famer Ben Stark playing a Ramunap Red deck with a dozen deserts.
So it is a very stark example, I'll agree. But can we really call it Ramunap Red? Because Ramunap Red Ramunap Ruins is a kind of desert, but this has got so many deserts, right?
Yeah, but this is definitely a Ramunap Red deck, because at the end of the day, this deck is more Ramunap Red than all the other ones. This is the actual Ramunap Red. All those other ones are just like red aggro. Actually,
I think that you're right. Back in the Solar Flare days, people would, there was
the Esper Reanimator deck from a decade ago.
So
Paul Cheon and Luis Scott Vargas.
It put Luis Scott Vargas and Paul Cheon on the map.
Yeah.
Right, so it was called Solar Flare in some circles, but it came from Japan. So when it first was coming out, people were calling it Japanimator, because Japanimator is also a cool name. But then the Japanese, like I think it was Kenji specifically, was like, that's not the Japanimator, that's Solar Flare. This is the Japanimator. And they made like an actual Reanimator deck. Not just a blue, black, white control deck that actually just had 2 Zombifies in it. They're like, we're actually going to put cards in our graveyard and actually try to reanimate Busto things instead of just like cheating out an Angel a little bit faster.
Instead of an Angel of Despair a little earlier and more often, they'll be like, okay, well, how about this? What if we just mean it and play a Chroma?
And like the Flash Red Dragon that like hits for the
Bogart and Hellkite.
Let's play Bogart and Hellkite in our Esper deck.
Thinks about that guy.
You do. That was a Pro Tour. I'm sorry, Worlds font. Was that your first or second Worlds?
Dude, so Desert Red. I don't know about all that, but what I do know is that Ben Stark's Mono Red deck has some really cool things going on besides just the Desert package, which notably features 3 Dunes of the Dead. Dunes of the Dead being the ideal desert to sacrifice to Ramunap Ruins or Scavenger Grounds.
Yeah, so when I first looked at this deck list, I was just staring at Dunes of the Dead, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. Why are there 3 copies of Dunes of the Dead and 3 copies of Sunscorched Desert? Isn't Sunscorched Desert just a way better desert? It actually took me a while to figure out that you wanted to sacrifice Dunes of the Dead to the other deserts. Then I was like, oh, wow, this is really good.
Well, what were you picturing doing with Dunes of the Dead?
I was just like looking for other cards. I'm like, how are you sacrificing this? I don't know, man. I was telling you. It took me a while, but I got there. I got there eventually.
Sweet.
But, it has a high desert count. The first thing that just stuck out in my mind, besides the, half the lands are deserts, is main deck Sand Strangler, 3 Sand Stranglers, and only 1 Hazoret.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he still has 3 Chandras also, but the cutting of all the Hazorets for Sand Stranglers is a huge move nod to the Temur Energy matchup and the Sultai Energy matchup. Like being able to play Sand Strangler and hitting Whirler Virtuoso. Like, just think about how Hazoret lines up against Whirler Virtuoso versus how Sand Strangler lines up against Whirler Virtuoso.
I have been on the Hazoret side of the Whirler Virtuoso fight more times than I would like to admit, and it never turns out well for the red deck.
And it's not like he doesn't have access to the Hazorets. He's got 1 in the main deck and 2 more in the sideboard. If need be, Like if he's playing against some kind of like control deck or something, he can pull the Sand Stranglers out for Hazorets and an extra Chandra. Don't get that twisted.
Yeah, so it seems awesome though. It's also great because I think, like you've mentioned many times in the past, even though the format is very heavily skewed towards energy decks, both 4-color energy and Teamer energy and now Sultai energy, the next big chunk of the format is these other Ramunap Red decks, just regular decks with, just rampaging Ferocidons or Carry Zevs. And if you're just going to play 3 or so Sand Stranglers in your main deck, you're going to murder the mirror match. Right? They're just going to get squashed by Flame Tongue Kavu.
Oh, yeah. And while it may look on the surface like this deck's mana curve is, like, weird and crazy, like his only 2-drops are 2 Kari Zev Skyship Raider, and his 1-drops are 4 Bowmet Courier and 3 Soul Scar Mage, and then he's got 3 ramp. It's like, what's going on here, right? Except there's actually a very, very clever, disciplined madness to this. So 4 Bowmet Courier, 3 Soul Scar Mage, 2 Magma Spray, and 2 Shocks means that when he's playing against aggressive decks, he has 11 ways to spend his first mana on his first turn to advance his game plan. And 11 is, as you know, is very one of the most important numbers for the Sly mana curve. Being able to have 11 1-drops is such a great dual maximization of maximum odds of drawing one without putting yourself at risk of drawing too many. And at 2-drops with 2 Kari Zev Skyship Raider, 4 Lightning Strike, 3 Abrade, and 2 Treasure Map, that's 11 2-drops also. So this is actually, while he's going to end up slow playing it a little bit against control decks, if he's playing against somebody aggressive, he's going to be able to play a card on turn 1 and a card on turn 2 an awful lot of the time. Yeah, so
there's 2 things that I really like about this. One of them is he's just accepting the control role and like the who's the beatdown sort of question in a lot of matchups. But the way that he has his deck laid out, because he has the main deck Sand Stranglers and so many point removal cards, like you're making a real statement as a Ramunap Red deck in Standard if you're going to play Magma Spray to the exclusion of 4 Shocks, right? Like you really just want to kill creatures and you want to kill particular creatures. Like that's the message that it's sending. His deck is so much better on the draw than a lot of red decks are on the draw. So like they get so much value just by going first, right? Like I'm just going to come in with Earthshaker Kenras and On-Crop Crashers, and that's going to be my game plan. Ben doesn't even have those cards. He's just like, tell you what, I'm going to give up a bunch of the most explosive draws that other Ramunap Red decks are capable of. In return, I'm just going to get a ton of value back on the games that I don't go first. And then he has these weird games he just crushes people with Treasure Map, right? That's so cool.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Treasure Map in this deck does a lot. Smoothing out your draw early, letting you spend your mana efficiently, but then also giving you just extra raw material to work with so that later you can just keep throwing deserts at your opponent without running out of mana.
Yeah, and then, I mean, it probably can't be overemphasized. Those treasures can tap for non-red mana, for example, black. I bet you could get some games by ribbonsing people with the backside of Cut to Ribbons. That it's only facilitated by Treasure Map, right?
Yeah, I mean, Cut to Ribbons is primarily here for as extra answers to stuff like Glorybringer. However, the ability to actually kick it, to actually be able to play it out of the graveyard with Treasure Map flipped, it's going to catch some people.
Just having the capability to do that and just, being knowledgeable about it if you're going to try this deck, I think is very valuable.
Yep. Other than that, I mean, I did think it was interesting seeing the Release the Gremlins continuing to show up.
So what's that guy for?
Artifacts.
What are the key artifacts we're going to go for? Because other people can you? I guess there's like, what is there? Maps.
I don't think map is the most common get.
No?
So no. So you can get, like, for instance, God Pharaoh's Gift or Gate to the Afterlife.
Oh, well, those are good.
You know, you can get Torrential Gear Hulk.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, those are way better targets than Treasure Map.
So there's a few, you know, and sometimes people will be playing stuff like where they'll have Heart of Kieran alongside Walking Ballista, Bomac Courier, Scrap Heap Scrounger, Aether Sphere Harvester, all kinds of stuff, you know? I mean, hell, a lot of the other red decks will have a bunch of artifacts that you could hit, so I just think it's interesting that Release the Gremlins doesn't have necessarily just a single specific target, but there are variations of different decks. There's some control decks, some energy decks, some, not as many energy decks, I guess, but some Mardu Vehicles decks, some red aggro decks that you're going to actually want to bring in to Release the Gremlins. But overall, a super, super cool build. Particularly the use of Sand Strangler, because Sand Strangler, this is definitely this is a red deck that's boarded against other red aggro and energy, and since that was 3/4 of the field, I mean he hit the metagame dead on, you know, but he did end up falling in the finals to Alex Lloyd's Esper Approach deck.
Yeah, the thing
notably not where you want the Sand Strangler or Magma Spray or any of that business.
Oh no! If there's a deck that you want your Earthshaker Kenras, it's against Approach. You know, traditionally it's a very, you know, just the traditional Approach blue-white based deck against the traditional Ramunap Red heavily has favored the red deck historically. But if you're gonna have a bunch of Abrades and Magma Sprays instead of Shocks and Sand Stranglers instead of Hazorets, your draws are not going to be as explosive offensively as the regular red deck. Alex Lloyd's Esper Approach, it's just I think like a little half turn away from the Guillaume's deck from the Pro Tour. So instead of red for Harness Lightning, he went with black for Fatal Push.
Notably though, in addition to getting Fatal Push, he gets access to 8 cycling lands. Like, if you just take a look at this mana base, you know, this is a little bit different of, like, getting to play with, first of all, getting to play 4 Fetid Pools, 4 Concealed Courtyard, 4 Drone Catacombs, and 2 Aether Hubs for 14 sources of black. It's a little bit easier on the mana base. Let's put it that way.
Oh, it's awesome, right? Like, also like Drowned Catacomb and, you know, Irrigated Farmland and they're all friends, right? Like, that's the thing that's crazy is the cycling lands are you know, closely aligned with Drowned Catacomb and Glacial Fortress. So they're actually like one making the next one better. Like, it seems weird, right, that you could have a land like Irrigated Farmland come into play, tapped in the first turn, and then followed up with a Drowned Catacomb on the second turn. They're besties, and then you're just hitting Search for Azcanta.
Which notably is a great way to flip your Fatal Push, right? No, damn. You can do it with 2 legends. If you legend rule the Search for Azcanta.
Well,
you got to work pretty hard to do that, though.
What I liked about this deck, he only has 1 Torrential Gear Hulk in the main deck, but he's got 2 more on the sideboard. But he's at least somewhat embracing kind of that 4 Settle the Wreckage Torrential Gear Hulk combo that the Guillaumes had at the Pro Tour. But he's like, in a way, kind of doubling down on it. Like, I love the inclusion of Vraska's Contempt. Like, isn't that insane?
In the sideboard?
Yeah, it's awesome. Like, it's such a good card to have in this strategy. It's like everything the deck wants to do in the matchup that you probably would want to have it. And Vraska's Contempt gives you an instant source of a solution for Gideon emblems, right? So, like, this deck's very bad against a Gideon emblem if it's in play. So that was actually one of the criticisms that I had personally about the Guillaume deck. They had no cast outs, so, like, you know, I guess, you know, can commit to memory it or something like that. But this gives you, like, a permanent potential solution to getting into the trials. You can target it, remove it from game, love it. If they have a counterspell for it, you can get it back with the Torrential Gear Hulk, really good interaction capability there. And it's a kind of interaction that you can't kind of get around with the other person's either main deck or sideboard cards. Like, oftentimes you'll have a situation where you're like, I'm going to cast out your Gideon at the end of your turn, untap and cast Approach, and then they're like, all right, I'm just going to cast out your cast out or something while you're tapped for Approach. Like, that's look, I mean, you might play out a longer mana sequence than that, but the fact that cast out can be interacted with everything from a demystify to another cast out, it makes it complicated. But nope, not with Vraska's Contempt. And man, is Vraska's Contempt good against Hazoret, which is one of the best cards against this deck.
Yeah, and once you board it, you even have access to 2 more Torrential Gearhulks in the sideboard, with what has become kind of a standard move of very few permanents that can be interacted with, very few win conditions game 1, because of just how effective Approach is, being able to let you sidestep the usual rules of engagement. But then in the sideboard, trying to shore up a lot of the counterplay that people have access to by playing a bunch of big threats, hitting from a few different angles with a couple of Torrential Gearhulks, a couple of the Scarab Gods, a full play set of Regal Caracles, and then even a pull from Tomorrow, which kind of functions as an additional threat, in this capacity. Like, once you have that many big boom booms, then if you just pull from Tomorrow for a sufficient size, it's very similar to being able to play a big victory condition.
The Black Splash here is so cool because you also get the Scarab God. I've seen a lot of Approach players do stuff like side Regal Caracol in against Temur Energy, and sometimes it works out. But I look at it and I'm like Regal Caracol, is that even a high power card against Temur Energy? Like, it's fine.
No.
They're not scared of that card, No. But you got to have something because you're afraid they're going to have full of negates, for your approaches. They're going to be pressuring you. They've got everything from high power cards to card advantage, haste cards, etc. It's like, all right, you got to have something, to try to get around, their negates. And it actually kind of stinks because, especially if your deck is based on fumigating, just putting more bodies out to fumigate isn't the most attractive game plan. But man, if you just resolve the Scarab God against Temur, that might be your entire game, right? You can just play around that card.
Yeah. I mean, that move's come up.
Yeah, I think it has happened before, but it seems awesome to me that we have this format that is ostensibly so cemented, and even the established archetypes like Ramunap Red and Approach of the Second Sun give us the opportunity for these new innovations, and I can't wait to try some of them out.
All right, well, hey, tell you what about the Grixis decks, man? How are we going to just skip over the Grixis decks? Like, for instance, Okada Nyota's Grixis Thopters deck. I know you like this deck.
So, is this the one from the top 8 of Shanghai?
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of opinions about this deck.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. First of all, I really liked it because it was just a departure from any of the other stuff that we had seen before. So even the new Pummeler deck or the new Ramunap Red deck or the new Approach deck were variations on things that we'd seen before. And I was just like, oh, this deck is really a wild departure from any of the established macro archetypes. And I initially thought that it was just like an improvised deck. And I was like, oh, this is improvised. And I'm like, wait, this isn't just an improvised deck. This is a deck that has an improvised card, but also has other things going on. And, it's got PNLR and Whirler Virtuoso, and those guys are best buddies. The one thing that I think it might be missing is, don't you think, what's the thing with the U and 1 flying creatures get +2/+2?
Favorable wins. They get +1/+1.
I thought that one might be awesome in this deck, but he didn't even need it. Deck was great.
Yeah, I mean, so to begin with, the tokensy aspect can be really good against some of the spot removal, but I think the Decoction module is the real stud here, real superstar. Yeah, so Decoction module combines with all these creatures that are sort of 1/7s, definitely Whirler Virtuoso, Pia Noir, and Maverick Thopterus, but to a degree, Aether Swooper as well. just because it gives you multiple energy when you play it, and that energy can be used to fuel stuff eventually. But what's more, Decoction Module, by giving you an energy for each one, you actually get paid extra when you're getting tokens. So your Whirler Virtuoso gives you an extra energy when you play it, and then when you make the Thopter, you get another extra energy. And as a result, you can now convert any 2 energy into a Thopter because you keep getting it on the discount. And if you get 2 Decoction Modules down, heaven forbid, then you actually are at a spot where every single energy can make a token. And then, obviously, the third one is an infinite loop. But you also can bounce things. Decoction Module gives you a way to, you can potentially interact with removal. That's pretty solid, too. But you can also just start looping your Maverick Thopterist or your Whirler Virtuoso or whatever in order to make a bunch more threats. If times get tough, it's actually conceivable that you could bounce your Sky Sovereign to get an extra shot. There's any number of things you could do. I think Decoction Module, though, is the real star of this deck, though.
Yeah, the unsung hero of this deck.
It's the glue that holds it all together.
So these are the things that I was thinking about. Like, obviously, Inventor's Goggles is the kind of card that if you were going to play an Artificer-based improvised deck, that's going to be one of the first.
Which we are.
Yes, that's going to be one of the first cards that you're going to go to. So that guy is sweet with Maverick Thopterist. He's
and Metallic Rebuke and the Reverse Engineer, all that.
Pretty good with Aether Swooper. I actually was really impressed by Aether Swooper in this deck. It's not one of the ones that you necessarily jump to for that macro archetype, but it's got some stuff going on. All these cards are fitting together, and I think it just spreads so much material with very little incremental mana investment, right? All the stuff you're kind of getting not for free, but at a steep discount as the cards kind of flow through. But I think it was like you were saying before with Decoction Module, this deck can kind of slow play, which is really non-intuitive. It gives you these opportunities to kind of be like, look, I don't need to just dump my hand on the table. I'm going to use Reverse Engineer and Decoction Module, and I can just harass you, force you to commit, and then I can make a big play.
Mm-hmm. Dude, how much do you like the Inventors Fairs in this deck? Multiple Inventors Fairs.
The red player in me is horrified by them. I can tell you that. And the Johnny in me really admires the fact that it allows you to play singleton copies of Aethersphere Harvester and Sky Sovereign in your deck.
Oh yeah, and get a little extra mileage.
Yeah.
But it's not. Obviously, this deck doesn't have that many artifacts. It just has 10 at the front, right? But with 13 token makers that make artifact tokens, it actually has access to a fair bit of artifactage.
Oh yeah, I think that the average artifact in this is probably going to be a Thopter, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. One last little note on this one. What do you think of River's Rebuke becoming industry standard?
That is crazy. It's another River's Rebuke deck, and love it.
And this wasn't the only one either. Obviously it was showing up in some of the some of the energy decks, but to be seeing it showing up in this, in Grixis, that's cool.
So one of the things I think is really great about River's Rebuke is its ability to handle all different kinds of permanents. I think that you look at it and, especially how we were discussing it last week, where it's typically there in a Temur or 4-color sideboard as a mirror breaker. If you look at Naiya's Grixis Thopter's deck, there's just some things that stick out about the deck and how it might interact with other decks in the format. For example, this deck looks to me like my first blush impression of it, absurdly bad against the card Authority of the Councils, right?
You always think that about every deck. You're just so all in on Authority of the Councils.
I was playing against Mono White Vampires last week at F&M, and I had 2 Authority Councils in play, and it was not pretty for them. All right, so but seriously, this deck puts a bunch of
You're such a spike, Flores.
This deck puts a bunch of 1-power creatures in play, and that kind of material is very bad against Authority of the Councils, especially in multiples. But, there are all kinds of non-creature machinery that people can put out, like God-Pharaoh's Gift, or, that whole regalia. That whole thing, of having, if you're a Pascal Maynard, you might have 3 God-Pharaoh's Gifts at play, right? So it's just this catch-all, and, all of that stuff, it can be really, really powerful, and, you can stay alive, right? Your opponent has, huge lifelinking creatures. They're, coming out for free every turn. You're just using your Thopters to stay alive off of them, but your Thopters are kind of free, so that's okay. But you can make a big, profound play where you're interacting on a functional level with their cards, even though this is just a bounce card, because they can't just get them back, right? If you have to hard cast a God-Pharaoh's Gift for 7, right, you're not going to be doing very many other things, right? And it doesn't generate enough value that turn, maybe, to undo all the stuff that the Thopters deck has on its side. I just like that aspect to the card. It can anticipate many different kinds of threats, not just creatures.
We're still talking about River's Rebuke, right?
Yes, River's Rebuke. It does stuff, not just for creatures.
Hey, so what did you think of this Grixis list versus Sergio Ferry's Grixis list that he narrowly missed top 8 of Atlanta with? 9th place with a Grixis. They were calling it Grixis mid-range, but I think that's because they didn't have the heart to call it Grixis Energy, which it really was.
Well, I mean, as far as 2 Grixis decks can go, these are pretty different, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, Fairy's deck, it's got Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Like you said, it's an energy deck, right? That's its primary source of card advantage, along with Chandra Torch of Defiance.
Whirler Virtuoso, Glorybringer, Champion of Wits, and Hostage Taker, all at the Scarab God. I mean, there's a lot of options it has for 2-for-1s.
Yeah, honestly, I was a little confused by this deck. It has good cards, but I was shaking my head at the numbers, like 2 Gifted Aetherborn, 2 Hostage Taker, 2 Champion of Wits. I guess it depends on what you think you're going to be up against. I think that if I were going to play 6 2-drop black creatures, I would not play 4 Glint Sleeve Siphoner and 2 Gifted Aetherborn. I think I would default to the opposite. And if you're going to start from the position that you can cast a Gifted Aetherborn on the second turn, that, it seems a little disingenuous to me to be like, oh, well, that one's harder to cast. And then 2 Hostage Takers seems weird.
Don't say that. Don't say it's harder to cast. Just say Glint Sleeve Siphoner is better. But they wanted more 2s because, like all good decks, they want to make sure they have at least 11 plays that they can make on turn 2. And 4 Harness Lightning, 1 Abrade, 4 Glint Sleeve Siphoner, and 2 Gifted Aetherborn is once again adds up to 11. Illuminati confirmed.
Well, I was just saying I was confused at some of the numbers. I'm not saying that there might not be justifications. I love the fact that there's 4 Glorybringers. I kind of hate the fact that there's 2 Hostage Takers, 2 Champion of Wits, 1 the Scarab God, and 1 Vizier of Many Faces, though. It seems scattered to me.
It's diverse. It has a variety of approaches. Like, for instance, 2 Champion of Wits and 2 Doomfalls. It's a split. Which way do you want to go? I don't know, man. I think this deck looks sweet. This is sort of the embodiment of, I play with good cards, and I just kind of play with the cards I want to play with. Notice, there's another River's Rebuke. The card goes on and on.
Yeah, well, River's Rebuke is actually pretty interesting in this deck, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're literally in the 3 removal colors. And so to play River's Rebuke when you're playing all 3 of the removal colors, that's actually a statement.
What do you mean, all 3 of the removal colors? How is white not a removal color?
I mean, white is a removal color.
How is blue a removal color over white?
River's Rebuke. It's moving a lot of material.
Get out of here. Mardu is the removal.
Yeah, I guess Mardu's kind of the removal colors. But white is kill everybody, not just kill their stuff.
Not just cast out, right? So what do you think of the use of 1 Nico Bolas God Pharaoh?
I love it. Love it. This deck is this actually put so much damage pressure on you, right? Like it's swinging for the. You just come out with Gifted Aetherborns, you haste in with Glorybringer. Opponent's either like trying to defend himself, tapping out, whatever. You're like, ugh. Let me play my giant Delayed Blast Fireball Twins, right? That's what Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh is in this deck. It's just Fireball Twins. Like, get you. Take 7.
How do you feel about Never to Return? Good time for a comeback?
I like it.
Over of Vraska's Contempt?
It's options. It's diversity. If it's me...
Once you have no Torrential Gearhulks, the pressure to play all Vraska's Contempts is a lot lower.
The one that I like that people don't play enough, in my opinion, is Consigned to Oblivion. I like that card a lot.
Sure, I can see that. It's a decent one.
It's like, it's very... And it's actually, it's, in the right colors. It's very good in this deck, I think. It's very flexible. For example, it can answer... both a Hazoret and, I don't know, a Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh. How many cards can say that? Well, I guess Vraska's Contempt does a better job with both.
How do you like Hostage Taker in the format? I mean, it's always a good card, but...
I think Hostage Taker is one of the best cards in the format. I absolutely hate playing against it. It is such a respectable card. You have to be, like, very precise, in my opinion. Like, even if you're playing cards like Treasure Map, I think people underrate how good Hostage Taker is against mid-range control decks. It's awesome against Treasure Map. Like, if you're just...
Nobody plays Treasure Map except us and Ben Stark.
I mean, I don't know. It's in all my decks, and it has been since the first week. So, like, I respect the Hostage Taker a lot. Actually, one of the things that I found... hopefully this could be helpful to some folks, is that people just don't realize that Hostage Taker has a good interaction with Treasure Map. It does. It can take artifacts. So just keep that in mind. You have to wait on when you're gonna play certain cards, or you have to have an instant speed removal spell that can remove a 3 toughness creature like an Abrade or a Lightning Strike on hand for timing purposes. Because the worst thing in the world is if they have 6 and they're just like, Hostage Taker, immediately cast your Treasure Map, that is an outsized amount of value there, because it's not just that they got you with a 2-for-1, right? If it's just a 2-for-1, you're like, all right, that stinks. 2-for-1s are anticipatable, but it's still like a forecasting cost 2/3, so the other side of the 2-for wasn't that good. It's like a 4-for-1. And it's not just that it was a 4-for-1, it's like a 7-for-1, because that was supposed to be your 3 cards.
Okay. So you like the Gifted Aetherborns over the Glint Sleeve Siphoners then? Like, once you're going to go down this road and play this much black?
I do.
Then what do you think of Rayo Moria's blue-black version? It's a similar sort of deck conceptually, but instead of Glorybringer and Chandra and Whirler Virtuoso and the like, he has more of all the other stuff, but then he's got this Liliana Death's Majesty Chart a Course sort of package. And then notably, he has 4 Gifted Aetherborn and 3 Glint Sleeve Siphoner.
Which event was this, sorry?
Over in Shanghai. So in the top 8 of... I'm sorry, 13th place. 13th place of Shanghai. Rayo Moria, sorry for butchering the name, but this is kind of actually very much speaking to the Solar Flare style that we alluded to earlier, with 4 Chart a Course doing a pretty mean compulsive research impression, plus obviously Champion of Wits, which is an excellent way to get fatties into the graveyard, or mostly just improve the quality of your draw. We have a... this is like in so many ways a Solar Flare deck. And instead of the 2 Zombifies, we've got 2 Liliana Death's Majesties to give you a way to rebuy stuff like your Noxious Gearhulk, Torrential Gearhulk. You can get them out ahead of schedule, but you can also drop the Scarab God. And what's more, he's even got a Demon of Dark Schemes, which is a really cool sideboard weapon against a format full of pirates.
So I like this deck a lot. I actually think this deck is promising in terms of what it might imply the format can go to, right? So we've seen a bunch of decks this week that are like a little bit different than decks we've seen before, but variations on things that we'd seen before. It's not that we've never seen a deck like this, but it's just pushing the format in a different direction. I like Gifted Aetherborn more than Glintsleeve Siphoner at the 2, like you alluded to. And I like it contextually. Like, Gifted Aetherborn is a very dangerous card to play against if you're Ramunap Red. Like, you just don't like to play against it. Either you have to remove it on, or it's going to generate value. But it's also very good against Teamer Energy, right? Like, this is a card that can just straight up trade for a Hydra, no matter how big the Hydra is, and trades with value because it's cheaper and it has lifelink. On balance, like, Glintsleeve Siphoner, I don't know. I feel like it's a low power card, generally speaking, in the format. Is that fighting words? You don't like that?
I don't know. I mean, it can't be a low powered card in the format. It could be poorly positioned, but my goodness, it's just not low powered.
It does nothing for me. I don't know. I don't know. It just does nothing for me. I'm not impressed ever when I'm playing against it. Gifted Aetherborn, I actually always have to think twice. But there are other things we can talk about in this deck.
I love Chardacore so much.
Yeah, this is a good home. But there are things that are very puzzling about this deck list, right? Yeah. So I love Gonti. I think Gonti's a very good card. I think it's odd to have 2 Gontis and 1 Hostage Taker in a deck with this mana base. For one thing, I think Hostage Taker on average is just a better card than Gonti. And I love Gonti, right? So there's some universe where you have like 6 or 8 of these cards after sideboarding, and they would be very, very valuable to have. I like Noxious Gearhulk. I love the Scarab God, obviously, but this is an odd Torrential Gearhulk deck, right? I think that if I were going to play...
Just 9 targets, 4 Fatal Push, 3 Vraska's Contempt, and 2 Essence Scatter?
Like, if you're going to play a Torrential Gearhulk, which Rayo has chosen to do, I mean, there are other options than Doomfall and Walk the Plank that you can play. Like, both of these are, like, just role-player cards. They're fine cards, I guess.
They can be role-player. He's only got 1. Besides, you get a little extra mileage out of the out of the negates and essence extractions out of the sideboard.
But you can play, just for sake of argument, Consigned to Oblivion does a fair
you are always
imitation of both of those cards, right? And it's just more synergistic with your Torrential Gearhulk in multiple ways. I think that people don't know how good Consigned to Oblivion is until the first time they bounce a Godpharaoh's Gift with it. And then you're like, oh, wow, that was really, really useful to me. Because this card wasn't even in my deck to interact with this odd kind of permanent, but my opponent would have had me, and instead I just time-walked him 3 times. Now, that's really, really compelling, in my opinion. Having done it a bunch, it's good.
Dude, a couple Essence Scatters. What do you think?
Essence Scatter is... It depends on the metagame, like Fujita's always said, but I think this is a metagame where it's great. If it's me, I like it if it's in my deck, and if it's me, I think I like playing no creatures more than usual, because people will correctly play cards like Essence Scatter and Walk the Plank even.
So, just so that I'm clear, 2 Walk the Plank, 2 Essence Scatter, that's kind of a sweet split, right? But doesn't that mean that with 2 Walk the Plank, 2 Essence Scatter, 4 Gifted Aetherborn, and 3 Glintsleeve Siphoner, this deck has 11 ways to interact on turn 2?
Well, perhaps.
Interesting, huh? Starting to see through the matrix.
So this is... I actually dislike Walk the Plank the more that I think about it. It doesn't kill... No, I guess it's all right. Never mind.
Dude, Walk the Plank is great. Being able to go after the Long Tusk Cub?
Yeah, I guess it's all right. If you're going to play Gifted Aetherborn, it's not that tough to cast. It's exactly the same curve point for the exact same amount of cost.
Yeah, he's got 20 sources of black.
All right, respect.
And it's pretty easy. Only 4 of them come into play tapped. Most of the time.
I do like this deck, and I think
Dude,
that
Demon of Dark Schemes. You've got to like that, right?
I like it all right.
Only all right? Okay.
My favorite part of this deck is the Noxious Gearhulk, Vraska's Contempt, Gifted Aetherborn part. Like, I feel like that's an aspect of the deck that I would want to push. Like, I would want to have a sideboard configuration where I would bury a red deck in lifelink and gaining life and just all that. Just murder them. Like, every single thing, every single play I made was just made them feel like I can't keep it. Am I a griefer? Is that a griefer way of looking at it?
Yeah, you're trying to control the way they feel instead of winning the game.
Oh, man, I am a griefer.
All right, so how about this, man? Here's my favorite part. The split. 1 Dispossess and 1 Lost Legacy. No matter what you need to do, like, no matter which way,
Yeah, you got him.
So we alluded to earlier the blue-green Pummeler deck. What did you think about this? This is the list that Haynes Karim used to I guess finished top 8 at
Warsaw.
The GP over in Europe in Warsaw.
Unmitigatedly my favorite deck of the weekend. I heart this deck very many times. It's awesome.
It's kind of a red-green Pummeler deck mixed with a Teamer energy deck, except without the red parts of either half. And then he actually makes a little twist, right? Because it's not like anybody's playing with One with the Wind. But with Cartouche of Knowledge and One with Wind instead of like the various red pump spells, and then dive down so that it's like he has 6 Blossoming Defense.
So here's the thing with this deck. It's such an intuitive way of going about it that just no one had ever explored for some reason. Right?
Oh, see, I think part of it is that there's some reasons to not explore or to try it and dismiss it early on, but the format has collapsed into being 3/4 energy and red aggro. And once the format is 3/4 2 decks, you can make riskier decisions. Like, for instance, I'll just play with 0 removal spells and also 0 removal spells in the sideboard with the exception of Confiscation Coup.
Well, Cartouche of Ambition is kind of a removal spell in this deck, right?
It's not really a removal spell. It's much more about lifelink. It's an Armadillo Cloak. It does do a little bit of put a -1/-1 counter on, but there's nothing that you really want to kill that's a 1/1 for the most part. Most of the time, I guess you could kill Glint Sleeve Siphoner or whatever, but in general, you're going to be going after. You'll kill the
low power card, like I said. But
no. But it's not about that. It's about it's about giving your Pummeler lifelink. Or giving your Bristling Hydra lifelink.
Here's the thing about the Pummeler, right? So the Pummeler has this crazy ability, which is to pay 3 energy, and then you basically double its size.
Basically.
The enchantments, like Cartouche of Knowledge and One with the Wind, are just they're permanent sources of buffing versus like the temporary sources of buffing, like Larger Than Life. So you can make an investment in the Pummeler and just like put it on, and like now we have a flying Pummeler, right? You just come in. You don't have to try to kill them that turn. You could just gain an advantage. And there are a lot of decks that are not good at fighting against a flying Pummeler. Like if you turn 4, my Pummeler flies, come in for a decent amount of damage, you've got Blossoming Defense or Dive Down in your hand, they might just be dead and not know it yet.
Yeah, I mean, it does also help that the extra stats from One with the Wind or Cartouche of Knowledge, you get like a double or quadruple multiplier from using the Pummeler.
Yeah. And then the other thing I love about this deck, obviously, 4 copies of Bristling Hydra, the correct number of Bristling Hydras. Finally, week after week of energy decks, and I see 2 Bristling Hydra, 3 Bristling Hydra, just disgusted by these numbers. The correct number of Bristling Hydra, 4 copies, and in this deck, they're probably flying, so, they're the most dangerous Hydras there ever were.
You a big fan of the Miser's Ronus, the Indomitable?
No, not at all. But
with very few ways to attack with it ever.
I mean, yeah, like this deck has a bunch of like 1/1s and 2/2s, but no, I do not like that part of the deck at all. However,
just use Hashep Oasis
respect.
to get your guy big enough so that Ronus can attack.
Yeah, we don't. Just because I don't like that one part of the deck doesn't mean that I don't like lots of other parts of the deck.
Gotta admit, one swamp in the sideboard is pretty dope. With no the Scarab God, nothing.
I actually just kind of grit my teeth at it. I'm like, well, if I'm going to invest in a swamp and play Cartouche for Ambition, if it were me, I would have a lot of black cards in my sideboard. Like, there would be hostage takers and God knows what else aplenty. But, you know.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to help yourself.
No, I can't. Of course not. Are you kidding? I would literally be a griefer in the candy store.
Mm. And then I guess one last list I'd like to take a quick glance at. It's not too revolutionary, but
Mm-hmm.
Jedrick Simid over in Warsaw using a blue-white gift deck with relatively minor tweaks to what we saw at the PT. But I was curious your thoughts on this, and also it has an authority to consoles for you.
Well, he's got Fairgrounds Warden in his main deck. I kind of like that. I believe Pascal played it in the sideboard, right? Fairgrounds Warden.
Yeah, this is moving one of them to the main deck.
Yeah, I like that. I like Search for Azcanta in this deck. Obviously sets it up. I think it's all right. I think a lot of these things you can go either way, right? If the deck's full of Chart of Course, Strategic Planning, and Champion of Wits, I think, as well as Cast Out and Search for Azcanta, you're going to see a decent amount of cards in your deck in games that you have a chance to win. So playing some Miser's cards like Fumigate or Fairgrounds Warden, you're just going to see them more often than regular decks. However, he had to cut a Sacred Cat. Big difference, though. River's Rebuke again, Patrick.
Yep.
Everybody's rebuking the river.
Yeah, exactly one time also. It's just like mandatory. It's like obliterate you, one copy.
Yeah, but how many times do you have to cast that card? Right? Like, yeah. 40 power and lifelink zombies are coming over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Dude, Sacred Cat in the sideboard is nice.
Just like swap the Sacred Cat from the sideboard for a Fairgrounds Warden in the main deck. That's literally what happened.
Dude, the one thing that gets me is everybody just so sure that 3 irrigated farmland, 2 Ipnu Rivulet, and 1 hostile desert is just the perfect distribution? Maybe it is.
I still don't even get the hostile desert. Like, I think
hostile desert's actually I like 1 hostile desert in this deck. The use of so with 4 Chart of Course, 2 Search for Azcanta, 4 Strategic Plannings, and 4 Minister of Inquiries, plus 4 Champion of Wits, you have so many ways that you put land into your graveyard. It's often the case that you don't use it, but it's really nice when you do. And the first one makes it a lot harder to actually get mana screwed from it, Well,
I just think, from my perspective, if you rivel it, every single time I see somebody use it, it looks like a hero.
Oh, yeah. Ipnu Rivulet's the one that, to me, I look at this deck and I'm like, man, I sure could imagine myself playing with more than 2 Ipnu Rivulets.
Like, every single time somebody's just like, all right, I'm going to remove your graveyard. I'm like, all right, I'm going to try to use the Ipnu Rivulet. Like, oh, Angel of Invention, sweet, kill you. Right? Like, how do you not have 4? Like, that guy is so good, especially because there's a decent amount of non-colored casting costs in this deck, like not just Godfarer's Gift, but like 3 on the refurbish, whatever. It's not like you're always taking a pounding from having it in your deck.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, you got Sacred Cat, so you can like Rivulet, get it back, Rivulet, get it back.
Yes, you can do that. That is true. However, the Ipnu Rivulet will have a hard time casting Sacred Cat even on the backside because of its economical embalm and casting cost of W. So those don't work out real well. But that's one of the few cases where Ipnu Rivulet would not be that good with your worst card.
Yep. Well, I gotta say, man, even though I sure am hoping that they ban Rogue Refiner or Attune with Ether or both, there were some pretty sweet decks this weekend.
I'm really happy with how all this stuff shook out. I think it was an exciting weekend, and I'm just surprised that there's so many good new decks that came out.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff, man. It's it's kind of sweet what kind of stuff you can develop when you know that two decks are going to be 3/4 of the field.
Ooh, I like them odds. Speaking,
it reminds me a little bit of when I played in Orlando, Conley Woods and I, Brew versus Brew in the finals, just like Ben Stark. When we see, Ben Stark with Ramunap Red versus Alex Lloyd with Esper Approach in the finals, despite how much the format is just so much energy versus red. For us, we were like, man, everybody's just playing the same, Delver or human decks. Oh, no, it was just all Valakut or Delver. But anyway, I think there's still some room to innovate. I do hope that the format, opens up a little bit with the potential banning of an energy card, because I think there's some. I think that, like we saw here, there's some really cool stuff just beneath the surface, bursting, trying to get out.
So I think that even just in the God Pharaoh's Gift portion of the metagame playground, there's so much stuff that could happen, right? We've just looked at blue-white versions, but there's Esper versions. There's still trophy mage versions that could exist with Gates of the Afterlife. It just so happens, I think, right now that this is the popular version with 4 refurbish. But then there's blue-red versions and blue-black versions. All different kinds of God Pharaoh's Gift decks. All have a little bit different angle on the metagame, different interactions, and although they tend to all have a similar thing that they want to get to at the end.
Yep. Well, we'll see what the next couple weeks bring.
Wait! We will see you tomorrow.
What?
Yep.
Do we have a preview?
We do. We have an unstable preview. It will be very revealed tomorrow. Very revealed tomorrow.
So check back here and check it out. But you also check other places and stuff too, check out where to share us on social media.
Oh, you could do that on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon. We're Top Level Podcast in all those places. So we appreciate it when you share, and all that kind of stuff, or patronize us. For example, Fabian Nunez was a valuable patron of ours.
Thank you, Fabian. Definitely.
So we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber space state.